Welcome. Please comment where you're watching from in the world. Detroit has always had this energy at night, the kind that hums under your skin like electricity. I'd lived in Corktown long enough to know the city could pull you into something unforgettable, or something you'd wish you could forget. On that night, it turned out to be both. I matched with him on Bumble. He introduced himself as Vince. He suggested a rave. I'd been to enough Detroit raves to know that half the magic is in the places that barely exist. Empty warehouses, abandoned factories lit up for one night before going dark again. So when he dropped a pin near Eastern Market, I ignored the instinct to hesitate. I told myself it was just another underground party, nothing more. The Uber dropped me off on a quiet street that smelled faintly of onions and rust. The warehouses around me looked half asleep, hulking silhouettes under orange streetlights. The bass carried through the concrete before I even saw the door, a deep pulse that rattled in my ribs. Vince stood outside, exactly as he looked in his photos. Denim jacket, calm smile, wristbands in his hand. He slipped one onto my wrist and nodded to the bouncer, this massive guy whose stare alone could move people aside. Then the door swallowed us. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with sweat and condensation. Concrete walls glistened under rotating lights. A DJ I vaguely recognized hunched over his gear, and the sound system was clean enough to feel surgical. The crowd danced with that particular Detroit focus, heads down, bodies moving like extensions of the beat. It wasn't about showing off, it was about surrendering. For the first couple of hours, it felt incredible. Vince wasn't clingy. He got us bottles of water, not drinks, and stayed close enough to feel safe without hovering. We moved together with the crowd, heat rising, breath fogging under the strobes. For a while, I forgot this was a date. It was just music, sweat, and the low thrum of bass that kept everything alive. Around 2 a.m, I hit my limit. The air felt like soup, my skin slick with sweat. I leaned toward him, shouting over the music, "I need some air." He smiled and motioned for me to follow. We slipped through a curtain of plastic sheeting, down a narrow corridor, then up an iron staircase that smelled like rust and rain. The sound softened as we climbed, until it was only a muffled heartbeat beneath us. At the top, he opened a side door into a small room. A single bulb buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow light. Old posters curled on the walls. A couch slumped against one corner, like it had been abandoned years ago. It was quiet, eerily so. "Better?" he asked. I nodded, trying to slow my breathing. But something about the space made my stomach tighten. It felt too empty, too deliberate, as if it had been prepared for something. Then the door clicked shut behind me. Not slammed. Just clicked. Locked. I turned, confused. Vince was leaning casually against the door, one hand behind his back. When he brought it forward, I saw the handcuffs dangling from his fingers, the chrome flaking around the hinges. "This," he said softly, "is where the fun begins." For a second, I thought he was joking. Some weird attempt at kink banter. I forced a laugh. "I'm not into that." But he didn't laugh. He stepped closer, holding up my wrist as if measuring it against the cuff. "Door stays locked until I'm finished," he added, voice calm, almost apologetic. The room felt smaller. My palms were slick, my heart pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. I kept my tone even. "Then unlock it. I want to leave." He tilted his head, studying me. "You don't leave," he said. "Not yet." He was close now, close enough that I could smell detergent and something faintly metallic on him. My mind raced. Downstairs, the party raged on, hundreds of people lost in the music, oblivious to what was happening one floor above them. Then suddenly the knob rattled. The door cracked open, and another guy stumbled in, mid-conversation with someone in the hall. He froze when he saw the cuffs, my face, Vince standing too close. My bad," the guy muttered, backing out quickly. But the moment was enough. I shoved past Vince before he could react, slamming my shoulder against the frame. His hand grazed my sleeve, but didn't catch. I bolted into the hallway, down the iron stairs, and straight back into the pulse of the crowd. The music hit me like oxygen. I pushed through dancers until I reached the bouncer, words tumbling out of me. "There's a guy upstairs, handcuffs, locked door." The bouncer didn't flinch. He exchanged a look with another staff member, and 2 of them moved toward the stairwell. That was all I needed. I stripped the wristband off my arm, dropped it on the floor, and walked out into the freezing Detroit night. The air burned my lungs, but it felt cleaner than anything inside that building. The city stretched out in front of me, Greshit's empty lanes, the glow of the Ambassador Bridge in the distance, the red blink of the old power plant stacks. I kept walking until I found an open diner, ordered coffee I didn't drink, and waited for my hands to stop shaking. 2 days later, I went back to Eastern Market during daylight to see the warehouse again. The pin dropped me in the same spot, but the building was gone. Not demolished, just gone. Where it had been was nothing but an empty lot, cracked pavement, and weeds pushing through. If you ever visit Oahu and a guy you barely know says he knows a secret waterfall, do not say yes. I'm writing that sentence like a road sign because I wish someone had posted it on the Pali Highway for me, preferably in flashing letters with sirens. I'd been on the island for 2 weeks, hiding from a Seattle winter, and pretending I was a person who hikes at dawn instead of a person who complains about sand in shoes. I was staying in a room off University Avenue near Manoa, the kind of rental with a sticky screen door and a gecko that claimed the kitchen ceiling. I'd learned to ride the bus, I'd learned that slippers means flip-flops, and I'd learned that plate lunch fixes almost anything except loneliness. So like an idiot, I opened a dating app. He called himself Keone. He had the carved from Koa look that makes you forgive bad grammar and blurry photos. Our chat was easy. Shave ice at Waiola'a, favorite malasada flavors. I said hapia, he said all of them, and how tourists crowd the wrong beaches. When I said I'd hiked Manoa Falls with 400 of my closest friends, he sent a winky face and typed, I know a waterfall nobody posts. The bait glowed. We met in the parking lot of Along's Drugs in Kailua because it's on the way. His truck was the kind that sounded like it had survived 3 lifetimes and 2 hurricanes. The bed was empty except for a coil of rope and a small cooler. He wore board shorts and slippers and a t-shirt with a pig hunting logo. You ready? He asked. Trust me, this one's special. We took the Pali toward the windward side, the cliffs lifting like green ribs to our left. I watched the lookout flash by and thought of the plaques up there that talk about warriors driven off the edge. Trade winds shoved at the truck. Rain arrived without warning and left just as fast, the way it does here, like the sky clearing its throat. Most people don't know this trail, he said, turning down a side road I couldn't name. It's more real. We pulled onto a muddy shoulder and parked behind a line of ironwoods. No signs, no trailhead, nothing official. Just a gap in the house scrub that looked like something a boar would choose. You sure this is okay? I asked, trying to keep it light. He grinned. It's fine. Locals only, yeah? Stick with me. The path swallowed us in 10 steps. Ferns brushed my legs, guava leaves slapped my arms. The air under the canopy felt like a wet towel. Roots knuckled out of the earth, slick with red mud. I learned the island's color the hard way, first on my calves, then on the back of my hands as I grabbed at anything that looked sturdy and wasn't. We climbed, slid, reclimbed. Somewhere nearby, water made the low, constant sound of a crowd whispering. Almost there, he kept saying. You'll hear it before you see it. I did. The waterfall announced itself as a change in the air. The temperature dropped, and the wind carried mist with it. The trees opened into a bowl of rock, and there it was, white water spilling down a basalt face into a round, green pool. No one else. No keep-out signs. No diving pictograms. Just a rope tied to a tree and a long, flat boulder that jutted over the deep. It was beautiful in the way a blade can be beautiful. Keone didn't look at the falls. He looked at me. See, he said. Real. He dropped his slippers, padded across the boulder, and tugged the rope. Slippery but strong. He tossed me a look. You trust me? I laughed too loud. Define trust. Means you follow. Means you jump, he said. People bond when they do something that scares them. Adrenaline makes you honest. He said it like a mantra he'd rehearsed in a mirror. I checked my phone. 1 bar, then none. The clouds moved in that quick, dramatic way they do here, turning the green darker. I heard something in the brush, a low rustle, not wind, not water. Pig, my brain offered, calm and unhelpful. Or something else. I stepped back from the edge on instinct. He made a tisk sound. You're overthinking. Look. He walked to the very lip of the rock, toes hanging, arms out. For a second, he was a photo someone else would post. Local guy, fearless, blue-green pool below. He didn't jump. He turned, small smile, measuring me. I'm good watching, I said. Maybe you go first. That's not trust, he said. No smile now. Anyway, it's better together. He reached for my hand. It wasn't aggressive, exactly. It was practiced. A guide gesture. A dance lead gesture. His fingers were cool, and mine were muddy and stiff. He tugged, just enough to set the plan. 2 steps, knees bent, rope in the left hand, the pool swallowing us, fear turning to laughter as we broke the surface like people in commercials. My body did the math. The boulder was slick, the pool was ringed with rocks greased by algae, the rope was frayed at the knot. The waterfall's voice hit a dozen knocks and scrapes under white noise. I pulled my hand back. No. His face changed like a door closing. The charm went first. Then the patience. You came because I know this place, he said. So let me show you. Or were you lying when you said you wanted something real? Lightning stitched the clouds somewhere behind the ridge, too far to count, but close enough to feel in the skin. The waterfall fattened in a minute, thread becoming ribbon. Flash flood, my brain supplied this time louder. I looked at the rope again, noticed how the knot had chewed the bark. I noticed the cooler by the tree, the bungee cords looped around it, the fact that he hadn't brought water or snacks or a first aid kit, because this wasn't a hike. This was a dare. He stepped closer. It's simple, he said. You jump, and afterward you'll be different. You'll thank me. I didn't answer. I turned and ran. Running on slick roots and slippers is a bad idea. I did it anyway. Branches clawed at my arms. Mud sucked at my shoes. Somewhere behind me he shouted my name, not angry yet, confused, like a teacher calling after a kid who left the tour. The trail wasn't a trail so much as a suggestion. Every fork looked identical. The smell changed again. Wet stone, then wet earth, then something sour. My heart was a drum in my throat. I aimed for sound that wasn't water, any sound, a road, a radio, an airplane. What I got was a whistle. Short, sharp, official. Then, hey, you on the trail? A man in brown appeared from the brush like a magic trick, state park patch on his sleeve, brimmed hat, a walkie crackling. I didn't say words at first. I made shapes with my mouth. He didn't ask questions. This way, he said, turning, and I followed the only person who didn't want me to jump. We hit a proper path within 5 minutes. Packed earth, actual footprints, orange ribbons tied to branches. When I glanced back, Keone was gone. The ranger didn't look surprised. People come out here all the time after rains, he said. They think the water's for them. He didn't say the other things, but he didn't have to. The rope. The cooler. The practiced hand. He walked me to his truck, gave me water, and asked if I needed a hospital or the police. I said no to both, because shame is a powerful sedative. He drove me back to the Long's lot, the same ironwoods whispering as if they hadn't watched me go in. Before I got out, he said, you hear thunder up there, you turn around. Even if the pool looks calm. Especially then. If I tell this story too fast, it sounds fake. Like something you'd find on one of those Reddit threads about creepiest date ever. But it happened, and it happened in Savannah, where everyone pretends the ghosts live in the cemeteries, when in truth they're walking around in expensive cologne, smiling at women like me. It was during a work trip. I was bored in my hotel room on Bay Street, the air thick with humidity even after dark, so I opened Bumble. That's where I met Adrian. We matched together. After maybe an hour of chatting, he suggested dinner. Not a restaurant, though. My family has an estate just outside the city, he said. It's quiet, private. I could cook for us. Every reasonable part of me screamed red flag. But another part, the part that watches too many romance movies, imagined a long candlelit table, oak trees dripping with moss, maybe a glass of wine under the stars. I told myself I'd send my location to a friend, that I'd be careful. And then I said yes. He picked me up in a gleaming old car, the kind you'd expect to see in a parade. He drove confidently through the historic district, past tourists taking ghost tours, past squares with fountains glowing in the yellow streetlights. At first, it was charming. He talked about his heritage, how his family had lived in Georgia for generations. But then we kept going, past the neighborhoods, past the lit streets, into long, quiet stretches of road lined with pines and swamp water. Almost there, he said. Finally, we turned down a dirt drive. The house that rose up at the end wasn't the pristine estate I had pictured. It was enormous, yes, but in the way a corpse is enormous when you stumble on it. Columns leaned, shutters dangled from hinges, and vines crawled up the walls. The place looked abandoned, except for the faint glow of candles in the windows. Inside, the smell hit me first, mold, damp wood, something faintly metallic. The entry hall was lined with cracked portraits and dusty furniture. Yet in the dining room, a table was set, 2 plates, 2 glasses of wine already poured, dozens of candles flickering. I tried to laugh it off. Wow, you really went all out. He just smiled. It's more intimate this way. No interruptions. We sat, but the food never came. He kept steering the conversation into questions that felt off. Not, "What's your favorite movie?" or "Where do you like to travel?" No, he asked whether anyone knew I was with him, whether my family checked in on me often, whether anyone was expecting me back that night. I laughed nervously and gave vague answers, my pulse hammering. I thought about leaving, but when I glanced toward the front door, I realized he had quietly shut it. Then upstairs I heard movement. Slow, deliberate steps, as if someone else was in the house. I froze. "Don't worry about that," Adrian said smoothly, like he'd read my mind. "It's just storage. Storage that walks." I excused myself, saying I needed the bathroom, and slipped toward the front hall instead. When I tried the door, it was locked. My stomach dropped. I turned, and there he was, watching me from the dining room entrance, smile still plastered across his face. "You'll like it here," he said softly. I don't know where the courage came from, but I bolted. Through a side hallway, past peeling wallpaper, until I spotted another door. It stuck at first, but then it gave way, and I stumbled outside into the overgrown yard. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I ran down the long driveway. Halfway to the road, I saw them, a cluster of rusted-out cars hidden behind some bushes. All with busted windows. All left to rot. My chest went cold. How many people had been driven here before me? I didn't stop running until I hit the main road, where, by some miracle, headlights appeared. A delivery truck slowed when the driver saw me waving like a lunatic, and I climbed in without explanation. He didn't ask questions. Maybe he saw my face and decided he didn't want to know. Back at my hotel, I locked the door and shook until the sun came up. I blocked Adrian, deleted Bumble, and tried to convince myself I'd overreacted. But when I think of that house, the smell, the footsteps upstairs, the graveyard of cars, I know the truth. Savannah's full of ghost stories, sure. But the scariest ones aren't about the dead. They're about the living, the ones who smile at you, pour your wine, and wait for the moment you realize you're not supposed to leave. Voice chat ended. You ever notice how rooftops in New York are like, romantic in movies but terrifying in real life? That's how I start this story every time, because if I don't laugh about it, I'll spiral. And yeah, it happened to me. I almost got yeeted off a building by a Tinder date. Not even kidding. It was last summer, July, the kind of sticky heat that makes the whole city smell like garbage juice and hot pretzels. I was single bored, swiping in my apartment in Bushwick, windows open, fan useless. That's when I matched with Hero. That was his name on the app, anyway. Tall, clean-cut, wore these sleek glasses, and had a smile like he'd just come out of a skincare ad. He messaged me first. "Want to see the best view of Manhattan? Now, if you're from here, you know that's catnip. People go nuts for skyline photos. Every rooftop is someone's secret brag." I figured it'd be one of those Williamsburg bars with overpriced cocktails in plastic cups. So I said yes. We met outside Shinjuku Ramen on St. Mark's. He was real, same glasses, same perfect smile. He didn't seem sketchy, didn't twitch, didn't reek of serial killer. He even held the door for me. Normal. Except he didn't take me to a bar. He led me through the East Village, weaving past the tattoo shops and thrift stores, then into this beat-up old building with graffiti on the lobby walls. The kind of place you'd expect to find pigeons squatting. He said his friend lived here. We climbed stairs. 5 flights, then 6, then 7. My legs were burning, sweat dripping down my back. I cracked a joke about elevators being extinct. He just smiled and said, "We're almost there." Finally, we pushed through a metal door onto the roof. And yeah, okay, it was beautiful. The whole Manhattan skyline stretched out like a postcard, Empire State glowing, bridges lit up like necklaces, air buzzing with summer heat. I was stunned enough to forget about the rusty nails and broken bottles scattered around. Then the door clanged shut. He'd locked it. At first, I thought it was for safety, like maybe the wind would slam it. But then he slipped the key into his pocket without looking at me. My stomach dropped. He walked to the edge, hands in his pockets, staring down. "Do you ever wonder what it would feel like?" he asked. What would feel like? My voice cracked. Jumping. I laughed, nervously, waiting for him to crack a smile, to say he was joking. He didn't. He started pacing, talking about how the city was fake, how everyone was playing roles, how maybe the only way to be free was to wake up together. Together. He turned, and his eyes were God, how do I describe them? Empty, like glass marbles. He walked toward me slow, deliberate, like a teacher trying to coax a confession. "I think about it every time I come up here," he whispered. "Would you jump with me?" I froze. My knees locked. My throat closed up. I said, no thanks, I've got rent due, because humor's my shield when I'm panicking. He didn't laugh. He grabbed my wrist. His hand was ice cold, grip firm. He pulled, gently at first, toward the edge. You don't understand yet, he said. But you will. The city noise below, horns, sirens, shouts, sounded 100 miles away. I could barely breathe. My sneakers scuffed against the gravel as I dug my heels in. Then, out of nowhere, a beam of light hit us. Hey, a voice barked. A security guard. I hadn't even noticed him following us up the stairs. The guy's flashlight cut through the night. Hero let go of me instantly, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. We were just looking, he muttered, smiling too wide. The guard didn't buy it. He marched us both downstairs, lecturing us about trespassing. I didn't argue. My hands were still shaking. I bolted as soon as we hit the street, air rushing into my lungs like I'd been underwater. The last time I let Tinder drive my life, I ended up almost buried in the Utah desert. And no, that's not exaggeration. That's exactly what nearly happened. See, I was 20, a college kid in Salt Lake City, broke as hell, phone battery perpetually hovering in the red. That night I was at some party near the U, watching the cheap beer run out and the Bluetooth speaker die mid-drake. A guy from Tinder, let's call him Chad because of course, texted me. I'll pick you up. We'll chill at my place. I'll drive you back later. The words drive you back later should have been a red flag. They should have been painted in neon on the Wasatch Mountains. But I was tipsy, lonely, and stupid enough to think being driven around by a stranger was spontaneous instead of suicidal. He pulled up in some beat-up black SUV, bass rattling the windows, and I slid in. He was handsome in that washed-out, too many White Claws way. Already drunker than I liked. But I told myself, hey, it's Utah. Half the people here drink like they're hiding from God. Relax. We talked a little, not much. He didn't ask where I lived. That was another red flag, the size of Temple Square. Instead, he just drove. Past Sugar House, past Murray, past the comforting glow of chain restaurants and gas stations. The mountains loomed closer, dark against the starless sky. Where are we going? I asked, pretending I wasn't gripping the door handle. Thought we'd take a drive, he said, voice flat. That was it. No smile, no wink. Just the road swallowing us, headlights cutting tunnels through the dark. We hit a dirt road somewhere past Little Cottonwood Canyon, the SUV bumping hard enough to rattle my teeth. The world outside turned into trees, no houses, no signs, no cell towers. My phone was on 1%. Figures. Utah service dies faster than beer at a frat party once you leave I-15. Finally, he parked at a dead end. Killed the engine. Total silence except for the ticking of metal cooling and my pulse hammering. He sat there, staring out at the blackness like he was waiting for something to come out of it. Then he turned to me. You like the dark side? I laughed nervously. I like Star Wars? He didn't laugh. People get stronger through pain, he said, slow, deliberate. The more you hit someone, the more they get used to it. They learn. The air inside that SUV turned thin, stale, suffocating. My skin crawled. Cool philosophy, I managed, voice cracking. But I should, get home. Early class tomorrow. He didn't answer. He just clutched the keys tighter, dangling them like a threat. His phone sat in the cup holder, glowing faintly with notifications. I thought about grabbing it, calling for help. He must have read my mind because he snatched it up and held it behind his head, smiling this smug little half-smile. Like he was saying, don't even think about it. My mouth went dry. I tried to think, to plan. The trees outside looked like teeth. Then he said, let's go inside. I've got friends you'll like. Once you meet them, you'll feel better. Inside? There was nothing around us. No cabin. No lights. Just dirt and dark. My stomach dropped. I started babbling, some mix of excuses and fake bravado. I told him I'd texted my roommates, sent them his picture, that they were waiting for me. I made it sound casual, like it was no big deal, but every word was loaded. People are expecting me. Someone knows where I am. You can't disappear me without consequences. His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he was going to snap, drag me out of the car. Instead, he exhaled hard, like I was a chore he didn't want to finish. Started the engine. We bumped back down that dirt road, but he didn't turn the headlights on. Pitch black. Just the sound of gravel crunching under tires. I sat frozen, convinced we were going to slam into a tree. Maybe that was the point. Maybe he didn't care. Eventually, lights appeared again, street lamps, gas stations, the ugly yellow glow of civilization. He pulled into a Burger King parking lot 40 miles from my place, shoved me hard against the seat, then tossed my backpack out the door. My phone shattered on the pavement. He didn't even look at me as I scrambled out. Just drove away, taillights vanishing into the night. I sat there on the curb, shaking, watching my breath fog in the cold. A stranger gave me a charger so I could call an Uber. My hands were trembling so bad I could barely type. If you ever want to test your survival instincts, don't go skydiving. Don't go hiking with no map. Just go on a first date with a girl from Hinge in Seattle. Trust me, the adrenaline spike will last years. So yeah, this was a couple winters ago, and surprise, it was raining. That's not even a detail, that's just the default setting here. I matched with this girl who looked like the poster child for every Capitol Hill dive bar. Shaved sides, dyed black bangs, tattoos crawling up her arms like ivy, piercings in places I didn't even know skin could hold metal. She told me she had 17. She said it casually, like she was mentioning pets. We talked piercings because apparently that's her favorite subject. I joked about maybe getting my nose done someday, and she called me baby in this teasing, syrupy voice, said she'd do it for me. I thought she meant drag me to a shop, hold my hand, that kind of thing. Cute, right? Stupid me. Fast forward, we meet at a bar in Belltown. Sticky floors, Christmas lights that had been left up way past December, jukebox coughing out the clash. She ordered Rainier in a can and dared me to match her shot for shot. The chemistry was good. Like, maybe this will be a story I tell at our wedding good. Then she said she had a surprise. Now, in Seattle, a surprise usually means some weird indie band tickets or maybe a joint someone rolled in their Subaru. Not this time. She pulled a safety pin off her denim jacket, one of those old, rusty ones holding a patch in place, and before I even registered what was happening, she shoved it straight through both her nostrils. Like no hesitation. Jammed it through cartilage, popped out the other side. Blood spilled immediately. It wasn't a cute trickle either, it was a faucet. She grinned through it, her teeth pink, and said, "See? It doesn't even hurt." Every neuron in my brain screamed nope. People at the bar turned to look. My gut reaction was to pull back, but she lunged toward me with that bloody pin like she was about to give me the world's most unsanitary DIY piercing. I grabbed her wrist to stop her, lightly, not hard, but the crowd only saw the blood and her scream. And suddenly, I wasn't the guy trying not to get stabbed with a piece of street jewelry. I was the villain. "You hit her," someone shouted from the bar. "No," I yelled back, but the eyes on me said guilty. Meanwhile, she just stood there soaking it all in. Blood streaming, eyes sparkling like she was feeding on the chaos. She didn't explain, didn't laugh it off. She just let them think whatever. And the crowd did what crowds in dive bars do best, they got mean. A couple guys closed in on me, voices hot and accusing. My pulse spiked. My brain started running math on whether I could make it to the door before someone swung. She just tilted her head, lips curling like she'd won something. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't about piercings. This wasn't about me. This was sport to her. So I did the only thing that made sense. I bolted, pushed through the bodies, spilled beer on my shirt, caught a wave of jeers as I hit the street. Rain smacked me in the face, cold and cleansing. I didn't stop moving until I was blocks away, chest heaving, lungs full of wet air. By the time I looked back, she was gone. Probably still inside, still bleeding, still smiling. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, replaying it, wondering if she'd planned the whole thing. If she liked the drama. If she made a habit of setting guys up to look like monsters. Okay, so I know I was dumb. You don't need to say it. I already know. But in my defense, I was 16, and everything felt like it was supposed to be a big deal. Every date, every crush, every text notification lighting up my cracked iPhone screen. This all happened in Chicago, the North Side, where the buses always smell like wet winter coats, and the wind off the lake makes you question your life choices. I was bored one Saturday, scrolling on a knockoff version of Tinder that was supposed to be for teens. Yeah, probably illegal, but we didn't care. I was swiping half as a joke, half because I hated how quiet my phone had been lately. That's when I saw him. His profile didn't even have a name, just a blank space, but his face was cute. Dark hair, kind of generic, but in a way that felt safe. He wore a hoodie in all his pics, no weird shirtless bathroom poses, no gang signs, nothing cringy. So of course, I swiped right. We matched instantly. My heart jumped like it was destiny, even though I knew it was probably just the app feeding me. He messaged, "Hi, I'm Dick." Yes, Dick. I thought it was a joke at first. I told him my name, Aurora, and we started chatting. Turns out he went to a different high school not too far from mine, which made it feel more legit. By Thursday, he asked me to hang out that weekend. We met downtown in the Loop, right by Millennium Park, because that's where everyone met up when you didn't know what else to do. He was shorter than I expected, like way shorter. 5'3" tops. He tried to make up for it by bringing me a single red rose, which was either sweet or sad. I couldn't decide. We walked around for a while before sitting in a little park. I remember the sound of the L trains rattling overhead, people shouting, taxis honking, normal Chicago chaos. He talked a lot about random stuff, music, his stress headaches, how people didn't understand him. Then he leaned in, all serious, and asked if he could kiss me. I said no, politely, but he didn't let it drop. He leaned closer, whispering about how it was important. Finally I snapped, why? That's when he said it, that he had sex-induced migraines, and if he went too long without intimacy, he'd get crippling headaches that left him bedridden for 2 days. I remember blinking at him, the wind biting my cheeks, thinking, did he just try to medical condition me into kissing him? I wasn't stupid enough to fall for it. I told him I had to leave, mumbled something about meeting my mom. I ducked into a beauty salon across the street where the ladies knew me, pretended I was waiting for a ride, and killed an hour just so he wouldn't follow me. Finally, I got on the bus and rode home. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. That night, I got a Snapchat from him. I don't even remember giving him my handle, but there it was. A video of him lying in bed looking sick. The caption reading, "Look what you do to me." He was fake groaning, holding his head like he was dying. My stomach flipped. I blocked him. A few days later, he popped up on Facebook. Friend request denied. Then again. Mutual friends meant he was real, which only made it scarier. Messages started coming in, first sweet, then obsessive. Stuff like, "I need you to put my name on your list," which made 0 sense, but also sounded threatening as hell. Soon after, I started running into him. At the bus stop, by my friend's apartment. Once outside my soccer game, he'd wave, act casual, like we were old friends. I told myself it was coincidence, but deep down I knew. The worst was the day I twisted my knee in practice. I could barely walk, and who shows up but Dick? Smiling, offering to take me back to his place to rest. I said no, but he guided me anyway, hand on my back like he owned me. Inside, he showed me the bathroom, and I locked myself in, shaking, texting my friend to come ASAP. When I finally came out, he was lying on the floor, pretending to be passed out. I panicked, leaned down, and his hand shot out, grabbing my chest. His pants were undone. He croaked something about needing me, about his condition. I ran, limped down the stairs as fast as my busted knee would let me, heart slamming. My friend honked outside, and I dove into her car, gasping out the story. And the creepiest part? A week later, I saw him again at the bus stop. He acted like nothing happened. Offered me gum. Just smiled, like he hadn't tried to trap me in his house. I should have known something was off the moment I saw her smile. Not in person, no, I mean the pictures on Tinder. Her name was Amy, golden blonde hair, eyes the color of swimming pools and hotel ads, and a body that looked like it belonged on a billboard outside Scottsdale. Perfect, yeah. Too perfect. But I was newly single, stuck in El Paso heat, and Tinder felt like the fastest cure for loneliness. And that smile, it was wide white plastic like a billboard grin. Didn't matter. I swiped. We matched. That little red notification hit, and my brain lit up like the star on the mountain. We talked. She typed fast, almost like she was waiting for me to log on. Within an hour she was flirting. 2 hours later it was suggestive. 3 hours and she wanted to meet. No build-up, no small talk about work, no what's your favorite taco truck. Just, let's get drinks. Tonight. Outskirts of town. I should have bailed right there. Nobody suggests meeting at a roadside bar off Montana Avenue, unless they've got something to hide. But I told myself, hell, maybe she's real. Maybe she doesn't want some trendy brewery downtown. Maybe she likes grit. So I drove. Neon beer signs buzzed in the window as I pulled up. The lot was half empty, except for a few rigs and cars with cracked windshields. Inside, the jukebox played George Strait, sticky floors tugged at my shoes, and every head turned when I walked in like I'd stepped onto a stage I didn't audition for. Amy wasn't there. Not the Amy from the photos. 10 minutes ticked by, long enough for me to start nursing a watery beer, long enough for the regulars to size me up. Then a woman slid into the booth. She had brown hair, dark eyes, a face that didn't match the photos at all. "Sorry, traffic," she said. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "You look different," I told her. She shrugged. "Bad hair day." My stomach nodded. I pulled up the profile on my phone while she excused herself to the bathroom. That's when I saw it. One photo where Amy had 6 fingers. Another where her earring melted into her hair. AI. I didn't even have that word locked in my head yet, but I knew it wasn't human. I called my buddy Jonah. "These photos aren't real," I whispered. He texted back, "Get out. It's a scam." I slid from the booth, headed for the door. That's when the world tilted. A blow slammed into the back of my skull. I hit the floor hard, vision fracturing into shards of neon and ceiling fan blades. A man loomed over me, huge, bald, with a skull tattoo wrapping around his face like it wanted to eat me whole. "Where were you?" he growled at the brunette who'd reappeared. She didn't look guilty. She looked impatient. "Pay me," she snapped. Money changed hands. Then his hand shot down, jabbing a needle into my neck. Cold fire spread through my veins. My body slowed. My mouth tried to shout, but made no sound. Limbs heavy, useless. Breathing shallow. He dragged me outside, shoved me into a van. The seat smelled of gasoline and sweat. My eyelids fought gravity, but I stayed awake enough to hear him say, "Your ransom's gonna get us a nice payday." The van roared down the highway. Headlights blurred, red taillights stretched like smears of paint. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My heart thundered like a trapped bird while my tongue sat dead in my mouth. Then sirens. Blue and red washed the cabin. The driver cursed, floored it. The van fishtailed, tires screaming. I forced every ounce of strength I had into one word, air leaking past dead lips. "Help." A cop heard. Gun drawn, lights blazing, orders shouted. The man panicked, bolted. In the chaos, I rolled, door open, asphalt tearing skin from my arms as I tumbled. Pain was lightning. Air tasted alive again. The last thing I saw before blacking out was the van swallowed by sirens, the skull-faced man cursing as he vanished into the desert night. I gave my statement in a fluorescent police station, shaking, sick from whatever was in that needle. They told me I was lucky, that the gang had been luring men for ransom money. That Amy never existed. It's been 2 years. I deleted Tinder, but the paranoia stayed. Every time a friend request pops up from some blonde with a too perfect smile, I freeze. I look for extra fingers, crooked teeth, AI glitches. And still, sometimes late at night, my phone buzzes with a number I don't recognize. No profile picture. Just a message, "We didn't finish our date." I never answer. But I can't bring myself to block them either. Because what if it's not a bot this time? What if it's him? You ever get stared at so hard you feel like your skin doesn't fit right anymore? That's the best way I can describe Steve. And no, this isn't me exaggerating. Ask anyone who's ever been on a date in Philly, they'll tell you. Sometimes you swipe right, and sometimes you swipe straight into hell. We met on an app called Happen, the one that tells you who you cross paths with in real life. Cute in theory. Creepy in practice. Because the way Steve told it, we'd crossed paths like a dozen times around Center City, Suburban Station, Reading Terminal, even Broad and Walnut once. It was like fate, he said. Fate or stalking, I didn't know which at the time. Anyway, he messaged me about movies, action flicks, Die Hard versus Lethal Weapon kind of debates. He seemed normal, which in app terms means he didn't immediately send me a shirtless bathroom selfie. But then he got pushy. Wanted to meet that same night. At his apartment. To watch a movie. My brain screamed red flag, but my pride said, "Hey, at least someone wants you after the last guy ghosted." So yeah, I went. He lived in a one-bedroom near Fishtown, brick row house with cracked steps, trash cans lined up on the curb. I remember the street smelled like wet leaves and fried onions from some corner cheesesteak joint. I Ubered over, left my location with my sister just in case, because Philly dating rule number 1. Always have an alibi. At first, Steve was friendly, even sweet. Nervous laugh, "Too many, can I get you anything?" Offers. The apartment itself was fine. Tiny couch, thrift store art on the walls, the hum of the SEPTA line rattling the window glass. I thought, okay, maybe I was paranoid. Then the movie started. Except Steve didn't watch it. He watched me. Like not quick glances. Not shy smiles. Full-on, unblinking surveillance. His eyes were pale, washed-out blue, and they locked onto my face as if I were the screen. I laughed it off at first. You watching me or Bruce Willis? But he didn't break. Just said, both, without blinking. For 90 minutes, he didn't look away. I faked bathroom breaks. I checked my phone. Every time I turned back, his eyes were waiting, like headlights on a dark road. By the credits, I was sweating under my hoodie, even though it was October and cold enough outside to see your breath. I made up a lie about my mom being sick and needing to go home. He smiled too much when he said, "Stay a little longer." His mouth smiled, but his eyes flat. Like reading from a script. I finally got out, bolted down the cracked steps, and caught the 5 bus home, heart hammering. I figured that was it. Bad date, creepy stare, lesson learned. But that's not where it ended. When I got home, I had 20 messages from Steve. 10 missed calls. At first, the texts were sweet. Then they got angry. Then they got off. Things like, "I'm still watching the movie with you, and don't ignore me, you're mine." I blocked him. That should have been the end. Except around midnight, my mom woke me up asking me to call her phone because she couldn't find it. I dialed, and the ringtone came from our porch. I stepped outside, thinking she'd dropped it. The phone was wedged in a flower pot. And right then, a text popped up on her lock screen. From Steve. It said, "Check your gallery." I opened it. The first photos were innocent, my mom cooking. Then came the others. Pictures of me. Sleeping. Close-ups. Taken in my room. My stomach dropped so hard I almost puked. Another text buzzed in. "You should come inside. It's cold out." I slammed the door, locked everything, ran upstairs. My hands shook so bad I could barely dial 911. Cops came, searched the house, found nothing. No Steve. No signs of forced entry. Just those pictures sitting in my phone like evidence of a nightmare. I never saw him again in person, but 2 months later, a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have blocked me." I moved across the city after that, but it doesn't matter. Some nights when I'm half asleep, I swear I feel eyes on me. Like Steve's still there, watching unblinking. And here's the worst part. The photos stopped after that night. But what if that doesn't mean he left? What if it means he's saving the rest? Notes app, 3:12 a.m., Koreatown, box fan on high. I'm typing this before my brain scrubs the edges clean. If you ever read this, future me, remember, the smell was the first warning. Not the formaldehyde. Coffee. I met Lilith at the Getty, where she worked the coffee cart near the tram station. You know that hill, the 405 snarls below like a busted zipper, and the air up there feels fresher like the city is pretending to be healthy. She had pigtails that should have looked silly but didn't, and green eyes that made me think of traffic lights you run, because you don't want to stop. We matched after 3 days of me hovering over the heart button like it had teeth. In chat, she called Disneyland cute hell, said her favorite color was bruise, said she liked scars because they're honest. I filed it under goth banter, and kept going because I had just been dumped in August and Los Angeles was a heat lamp for lonely people. "Pick me up after my shift?" she texted. Somewhere special. Somewhere special, to me, means El Compadre flaming margaritas, maybe the observatory if parking karma held. To Lilith, it meant the Museum of Death on Hollywood Boulevard, tucked beside a shop selling sequined LA hats. We parked on a side street where the palms looked like they're eavesdropping. The boulevard was doing its normal fever dream, Spider-Man arguing with a knockoff minion over tips, a guy selling bootleg tours, tourists taking photos with Marilyn's star as if it might hatch. The museum's entry breathed out a refrigeration unit cold. It was the kind of cool that shrinks your skin to your bones. "I like it cold," she said, taking my arm like we'd done this 100 times. "Cold keeps things honest. My jokes live in my throat like a pocket knife. Same reason I keep my ex's texts," I said, and her mouth twitched like she knew whether that was true. Inside, death masks quiet as sleeping faces, a wall of letters from men who spelled love with a knife, glossy photos arranged to teach you where looking becomes trespassing. The lighting was the Instagram version of a morgue. I pretended to read placards. Mostly I watched Lilith watch the glass. She leaned toward an old photograph of a woman laid out on white linen and whispered. The Victorians were so theatrical. They understood the choreography. "The matinee must have been rough," I said, because I'm allergic to sincerity. "How would you like to die?" she asked as casually as got milk. I swallowed. The AC tasted like metal. "Ideally, I pass on that experience." "Boring," she murmured. "Hypothermia. Everyone thinks it's screaming, but the end is warm. Your body undresses itself. You get sleepy. Snow tucks you in. Her voice made it sound like a spa package. We slid past a case with antique scalpels, their handles yellowed like old teeth. She called one elegant. There was a drawing of a Viking punishment, a flayed back teased into feather shapes. She tilted her head. Wings. Beautiful. Here's a true thing. I wanted to kiss her. Here's another. My body was planning exits without telling me. I was clocking the fire doors, the nearest employee, the weight of her hand on my sleeve. She spoke about taking a life the way film students talk about getting the shot. It must feel like you're the conductor and the audience, she said near a row of crime scene Polaroids. All the power. Better than sex. I laughed too loudly. Have you had tacos al pastor from Leo's truck on La Brea? That's my church. She turned, finally looking directly at me. Her pupils were deep as oil wells. Pet, she said, tasting the word. You'd look sweet on a leash. Better trained. The security guard coughed. Somewhere, a cooler hummed. I realized my palms were sweating, and the air didn't care. We kept moving because that's what you do in Los Angeles when something wrong walks beside you. You pretend it's a tour. In the serial killer letter alcove, she brushed paper with the back of her fingers, reverent. People don't understand, she said. Control is a sacrament. I made a mental list. Ask a therapist about why my heart was beating like a trapped bird, and why I didn't walk out. Addendum. Because I was afraid of offending a girl who described flaying as beautiful. Because I am polite enough to die. We finished the loop. The gift shop sold toe tags and t-shirts that turned death into merch. Outside, Hollywood was damp heat and neon. She asked me to drop her off, a few blocks from my place. You don't trust me to know your building? I half joked, easing onto Highland and left on Franklin, catching a green that felt like mercy. I don't let men know where I live, she said. Too many psychos on apps. She patted my hand. Not you. Yet. She had me pull over by a quiet patch of jacaranda trees, little purple corpses staining the curb. This is fine, she said, opening the door. Thanks for the cold. The cold, the honesty. She smiled, and something underneath it did not. I drove home on the 101 with both windows down, letting the heat slap me straight. The Dodgers crackled on AM radio. Someone hit a double. The announcer's voice was a warm bath I slid into. Back at my K-Town shoebox, I blocked her, showered until the mirror fogged, and lay under the fan listening to the street. Sirens pulling a ribbon through the night, a couple arguing in Spanish, a scooter whining like an insect. 2 days. That's how long it took for the coffee smell to arrive. It threaded through my hallway at noon, braided with the hallway's usual smells, laundry steam, someone's kimchi jjigae. It was richer, sweet bitter, like the Getty cart. When I opened my door, there was nothing. No one. Just a postcard inside the mail slot. A Victorian woman with a ribbon tight at her throat, eyes closed, hair smoothed like she'd been ironed. On the back, tidy Catholic school handwriting. Warm and sleepy. L. She had my full name on the address label. I never gave her my last name. I told myself she could have Googled me from my first name and a handful of photos. I told myself coincidences happen because this city breeds them on medians. That night, I dreamed of the museum. Not the exhibits, my reflection in the glass as I walked beside her. In the dream, the reflection lagged a second behind, as if the glass wanted me for itself. When I woke up, there was a ring of condensation on my nightstand. I don't own any glasses with that pattern. I stopped sleeping with the window cracked. You want to know if I went to the cops? I did not. What would I say? A woman with pigtails likes cold rooms and has a stationary budget? I told friends in a bar on Virgil, under string lights trying too hard. They laughed, then didn't. One said, block her on everything. I did. Another said, move. I didn't. I should have trusted my gut about Ben from the beginning, but honestly, after 3 months of working remote for a tech startup and barely leaving my Capitol Hill apartment except for coffee runs, I was desperate for human interaction. He'd been sliding into my DMs for weeks, not creepy exactly, just persistent. LinkedIn messages that somehow turned personal, Instagram comments that were just flirty enough to make me curious. When he finally asked me to dinner at Shiro's, I figured what the hell. At least if it went badly, I'd get good sushi out of it. Ben turned out to be surprisingly charming in person. Tall, with that slightly rumpled software engineer look that somehow worked on him, thick-rimmed glasses, flannel shirt rolled up to reveal surprisingly muscular forearms. He worked at Amazon naturally, but in one of the cooler divisions doing something with machine learning, that actually sounded interesting when he explained it. More importantly, he made me laugh. Real laughs, not the polite chuckles I'd been giving to most of my dates lately. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the sake he kept ordering. We talked about everything: the absurdity of Seattle's housing market, our shared obsession with true crime podcasts, the way the city had changed since we'd both moved here. He was attentive without being overwhelming, asking follow-up questions about my work in UX design, remembering details I'd mentioned in our online conversations. By the time we'd worked our way through the omakase menu, I was genuinely considering his suggestion to continue the evening at his place. "I make a mean old-fashioned," he said, signaling for the check. "And I've got this view of the sound from my balcony that's pretty spectacular at night." I should mention that I'd had quite a bit of sake at this point. Enough that the idea of going home to my empty apartment to binge-watch Netflix felt depressing compared to the possibility of extending this surprisingly good evening. So when he called an Uber, I slid in beside him. His apartment in Belltown was exactly what I'd expected from a successful tech guy: minimalist furniture, expensive electronics, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing that promised view. He wasn't lying about the old-fashioned either. We stood on his balcony, drinks in hand, watching the ferries drift across Elliott Bay like illuminated ghosts. "This is nice," I said, and meant it. The city sparkled below us, all those lives playing out in lit windows. The alcohol had left me feeling warm and bold. "You're nice," he replied, moving closer. It was cheesy, but something about the way he said it, sincere, a little nervous, made it work. When he kissed me, it was soft at first, tentative. I kissed him back, tasting whiskey and the lingering sweetness of our dessert. His hands found my waist, pulling me closer, and I could feel the heat of his body through his shirt. We stumbled back inside, still kissing, his hands tangling in my hair. His bedroom was as meticulously organized as the rest of the apartment. We fell onto his king-sized bed, and for a while, everything was perfect. His hands were confident but not presumptuous, mapping the curves of my body through my dress. I could feel his excitement pressing against my thigh as we kissed, deeper now, more urgent. My own body was responding in ways it hadn't in months. He was just reaching for the zipper of my dress when he suddenly went rigid. "Oh," he said, his face contorting. "Oh no." His hand flew to his stomach, and I could actually hear it, a deep, ominous gurgling that seemed to echo through his entire torso. "I'm sorry," he gasped, scrambling off the bed. "I'm so sorry, just give me 1 second." He rushed toward what I assumed was the bathroom, moving with the desperate urgency of someone who knows they're about to lose a very important battle. I heard the door slam, then immediately creak open again. Apparently he'd been in too much of a hurry to close it properly. What happened next will be seared into my memory forever. The sound started almost immediately, violent, explosive sounds that seemed to go on forever. Between the retching and what I can only describe as liquid thunder, I could hear him moaning. Not the good kind of moaning we'd been building toward, but the deep, guttural sounds of someone whose body had completely betrayed them. Then came the smell. I've never experienced anything like it. It wasn't just the obvious bathroom smells, though those were certainly present and accounted for. It was something deeper, more complex. The raw fish we'd eaten, transformed into something that seemed to violate the laws of nature. It rolled out of that bathroom like a living thing, filling the apartment with such intensity that I actually gagged. "Jasmine," he called out between what sounded like dry heaves. "Don't leave. I'm almost ready again. Almost ready again." As if we could just pick up where we left off after this symphony of bodily functions. "It's just the sushi," he shouted, his voice echoing off the bathroom tiles. "Bad piece of yellowtail, I think. Give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I looked around his pristine apartment, now contaminated by the sounds and smells of his digestive apocalypse, and knew with absolute certainty that there weren't enough minutes in the world. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, trying to breathe through my mouth. Even in the hallway, I could still hear him, calling my name between bouts of what sounded like his stomach turning completely inside out. "Jasmine, where are you going? I feel better already." I practically ran to the elevator, jabbing the button repeatedly as if that would make it arrive faster. Even as the doors closed and I began my descent to the lobby, I swear I could still hear him calling my name through the walls of that building, his voice getting fainter, but never quite disappearing. The Uber ride home was silent except for the driver's soft jazz playlist and my own stunned breathing. I kept replaying the evening, how perfect it had been, how attracted I'd felt to him, how quickly it had all gone so spectacularly wrong. The first time I heard that watch, I was hunched over my laptop in a coffee shop in Tribeca, wrestling with copy for a boutique skincare brand that paid me an exposure and the occasional free serum. The Cartier's mechanical tick-tick-tick cut through the ambient noise like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. "Excuse me." His voice had that particular quality of someone who'd never been told no. Not sharp, but immovable. "You're Saracen, right? The copywriter?" I looked up to find a man in his early 30s, unremarkably handsome in the way that expensive grooming can make anyone attractive. Dark hair, good jawline, a smile that seemed practiced in mirrors. What struck me wasn't his appearance, but the way the entire coffee shop had subtly reorganized itself around him. Conversations dropping to whispers, the barista straightening her apron, even the ambient playlist seeming to lower its volume. "I'm Marcus Whitfield," he said, extending a hand. "I've been following your work." The name hit like a cold wave. Whitfield Industries. Real estate empire. Tabloid regular. The kind of wealth that bent reality around itself. "I have a proposition," he continued, settling into the chair across from me without invitation. "I need someone who understands narrative. Someone who can help me tell my story properly." That was 3 months ago. 3 months that feel like a fevered dream I'm still trying to wake up from. It started innocuously enough, a consulting contract, good money, interesting work. Marcus wanted to rehabilitate his public image after some unspecified scandal involving a business partner and missing funds. Nothing criminal, he assured me, just misunderstandings that got blown out of proportion. The first red flag should have been the NDA. 47 pages of legal language that essentially made discussing our professional relationship tantamount to treason. But the retainer was more than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined, so I signed. The second red flag was the calendar invite that appeared in my inbox the next morning. Optics Walk, Central Park, 10 a.m. No context, no agenda, just a command disguised as a meeting request. I showed up anyway. Marcus was waiting by the Bethesda fountain, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who looked like they'd stepped out of a Secret Service manual. A photographer lurked nearby, telephoto lens glinting in the morning sun. "Just walk with me," Marcus said, taking my arm with casual familiarity. "Look natural. Smile." The photos appeared in page 6 the next day. Whitfield's mystery woman. Who is she? The caption described me as a stunning brunette and possible new flame. I called Marcus immediately. "Relax," he said, that watch ticking steadily in the background. "It's all part of the strategy. We need to show a softer side, remember? You're helping me do that." The email arrived an hour later, subject line. Soften asset, phase 1 complete. Attached was a detailed analysis of social media engagement, sentiment tracking, and a timeline for escalating romantic narrative. I should have run then. Instead, I let myself be swept into his orbit like debris around a black hole. The luxury was intoxicating at first. Designer clothes appeared in my apartment. "You can't be seen with me in Target," he explained. Reservations at restaurants I'd only read about in magazines. A weekend in the Hamptons where I was introduced as his creative consultant to a crowd of people who looked through me like I was made of glass. The hostess at Le Bernardin knew his name but not mine, seating us at the best table while I trailed behind like an afterthought. The elevator in his building, a gleaming tower on the Upper East Side, required a special key card to access the penthouse floors. Mine only went to the 32nd floor, where his business offices were located. A small humiliation, but one that reminded me daily of my place in his hierarchy. The control crept in gradually. Suggestions about my social media posts. Maybe don't mention the client work, it looks desperate. Requests to keep my phone face down during dinners. I want your full attention. Gentle discouragement from seeing friends. They don't understand what we're building together. I want to know all of you, he'd whisper during those early weeks, his hands mapping my body like territory to be claimed. But what he really wanted was to remake me entirely. The Paris trip was the crescendo of his performance. First-class flights, a suite at the Plaza Athénée, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants where photographers just happened to be dining at nearby tables. He proposed on the Pont des Arts, not marriage, but a deeper partnership. The ring was a prop, returned to Cartier the next morning while I slept off jet lag. I found the brief by accident, left open on his laptop while he took a call. Girlfriend Asset Management, Paris campaign, read the header. Below it, a detailed breakdown of photo opportunities, wardrobe selections, and authentic moment staging. My name appeared throughout, but always as subject or asset. Never Sarah. The red-lined caption for our romantic dinner photo was the final straw. Whitfield and companion enjoy intimate evening at Lambroisy. Source confirms relationship serious and stabilizing following recent business difficulties. I confronted him that night. The watch stopped ticking for the first time since I'd known him. "You don't understand," he said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. "This is how it works. This is how everything works. You think those other women were different? You think any of this is real? I left Paris alone, using my own credit card for a coach ticket home. The smear campaign began before my plane touched down at JFK. The photos appeared everywhere within hours, carefully cropped images that made it look like I was cheating with a waiter from the hotel restaurant. My clients started ghosting me one by one. My landlord received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity in my apartment. My social media accounts were flooded with bots calling me a gold digger, a fraud, a whore. The machine Marcus had built to elevate his image pivoted seamlessly to destroying mine. Every tool that had been used to craft our fairy tale romance was now weaponized against me. The same photographers who had captured our authentic moments were now stalking me with telephoto lenses, the drone of their scooters following me through the city like mechanical wasps. I might have disappeared entirely if not for Elena, Marcus's former assistant, who reached out through an encrypted messaging app. She'd kept copies of everything: the briefs, the contracts, the detailed playbooks for managing romantic assets. She'd watched him destroy 3 other women the same way. "He calls it reputation arbitrage," she explained during our clandestine meeting in a Queen's diner. "He takes women with something to lose and uses their fear of losing it to control them. When they stop being useful, he destroys them as a warning to the next one." The journalist Elena connected me with was skeptical at first, but the documentation was overwhelming. The exposé ran 6 months later. The Whitfield Playbook: How a Billionaire Heir Weaponizes Romance. Public sentiment shifted, slowly at first, then all at once. Other women came forward with similar stories. The machine that had seemed so invincible began to show cracks. I've lived in Miami my whole life. The sun-scorched beaches, the neon nights on Ocean Drive, the endless parade of people trying to outshine each other, it all shapes the way you date here. I've gotten used to a certain type of woman: Instagram model perfect, bronze skin, filtered photos, smiles that look like they've been practiced in front of a ring light. Don't get me wrong, it's fun, but it's predictable. After a while, the flawless images blur together. So when Tiffany messaged me, I thought maybe I'd finally found someone different. Her profile? Pure fire. Bikini shots on yachts in Biscayne Bay, hotel balconies overlooking Brickell, dimly lit selfies where her lips seemed just a little too inviting. Her texts were even better, playful, dirty, like she was already in my head. She sent me photos that left little to the imagination. Late-night snaps of lace against tan skin, her hair spilling across hotel sheets. I ate it up. When she said, "Let's skip dinner. Meet me at my hotel," I didn't hesitate. To me, it sounded like confidence, like someone who didn't want to waste time with the usual pleasantries. I picked out a fitted shirt, fresh sneakers, sprayed on cologne. On the drive over, down Biscayne Boulevard, the lights bouncing off my windshield, I rehearsed lines in my head, imagined her perfume, her touch. I knocked on the door, heart pounding, ready to live out the fantasy she'd been feeding me. The door creaked open, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't Tiffany. It wasn't anyone close to Tiffany. Standing in front of me was a man. Middle-aged, overweight, wrapped in a damp bathrobe that clung to his skin. His smile was wide, too wide, and the first thing that hit me was the smell: sour sweat, cheap wine, and something musky stale. Behind him, the room looked nothing like the Instagram-worthy suites I'd pictured. Faded floral wallpaper peeling at the edges, threadbare carpet, and on the bed, a scene that twisted my gut. Lingerie laid out neatly, like an exhibit. Candles flickered on the nightstand, casting warped shadows that made the place look even dirtier. I froze. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from Tiffany: "Go inside. He's waiting." My chest tightened. That's when it clicked. Tiffany didn't exist, not in the way I thought. She was a mask, a digital honey trap, a lure. And the man in the bathrobe? He was the fisherman who reeled me in. "Don't worry, kid," he said, his voice gravelly, almost gentle, like he was trying to soothe me. "It'll be better than the pictures, you'll see. We just need to get comfortable." He gestured toward the bed, his hand lingering in the air. My legs stiffened. I wanted to bolt, but I couldn't move. His smile widened when he noticed me staring at the bedside table. That's when I saw it, a Polaroid camera. And around it, scattered on the nightstand, taped to the wall, were photos. Dozens of them. Different men. Some shirtless, some sitting on the edge of that same bed, faces caught between forced smiles and visible dread. Every single one looked like they'd been tricked too. A gallery of the lost. My breath caught in my throat. The man followed my gaze and chuckled. See? You're not the first. But you'll be my favorite. That was it, the breaking point. I shoved past him, ignoring the sudden grip of his hand grazing my arm. I yanked the door open and sprinted into the hallway. My sneakers slapped against the carpet as I tore down the corridor, the smell of sweat and wine still clinging to my nostrils. I didn't stop until I burst out of the hotel's sliding doors into the humid Miami night. Neon signs flickered overhead, cars honked on Biscayne, the city alive and oblivious while I stood there gasping, shaking, half expecting him to come lumbering after me. I stumbled into my car, locked the doors, and just sat there, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. My phone buzzed again. Another message. You should have stayed. I blocked the number so fast my thumb shook. I drove aimlessly for hours through Little Havana, over the causeway, past the glittering towers of Brickell. Normally, Miami at night feels electric, full of possibility. That night, it felt like a trap, every neon sign another lure, every perfect photo another mask. I can't get the Polaroids out of my head. The faces of the other men. How many of them walked away? How many didn't? That man wasn't improvising. He had a system. He had trophies. And I almost became one. I deleted Tiffany's profile, erased the texts, tried to scrub it from my phone, but not from my head. Miami doesn't look the same anymore. The Instagram model types I used to chase now look like predators wearing filters. Every DM feels dangerous, every smile calculated. I am a bisexual woman living off the Graham Avenue stop. My radiator hisses like it's judging me, and I was on my phone just to look the way people just toke once. The city outside my window smeared gold across the glass, delivery bikes slicing down Metropolitan, a bodega cat posted like security on a stack of Poland Spring, and my dating app lit up with a match so exquisitely Williamsburg it practically smelled like patchouli. Artsy, confident, black and white photos with paint on his hands. Bio bragged about abstract art, late-night jazz at St. Maisie, spontaneous adventures. I'm not proud to admit, my standards are sometimes no match for the precise combination of witty and has a loft. He was quick with it, references to Julius Eastman, a complaint about $18 cocktails said in a way that proved he still pays for them, and the kind of humor that feels like flirting with a blade. We were riffing, favorite murals, Domino Park, best dumplings, the tiny spot on Grand where the cash-only sign looks permanent, and the soothing nihilism of the G train. By minute 45 he said, "Drinks at this little bar on S. 2nd? It's dim in a flattering way," and I laughed because I appreciate honesty almost as much as flattering dimness. I wore a jumpsuit that pretends to be low effort. The air had that early spring Brooklyn bite, not cold, just petty. The bar was lantern lit, all reclaimed wood and candles fighting bravely against the smell of orange peel and ambition. He was exactly himself. Denim jacket paint flecked in a way that suggested he never actually washes it, rings on 2 fingers, smile that made the bartender look twice. We talked small then big. He pulled the night along like a ribbon, his studio in a converted factory, exposed bricks, sorry. A grant he almost got, a loft he said was messy in a curated way. Every sentence landed like a breadcrumb. By the second drink I remembered I was starving for novelty, and by the third I'd forgotten to be suspicious of men who described their spaces with adjectives. He said, "Let's go back to mine. There's a piece I want your take on. It looks different big." It sounded like conversation. It sounded like, fine, a little adventure. This is the part where people at home yell at the screen, and I want you to know I hear you. I will now ignore you like every horror protagonist does. We walked. Past the Domino Sugar sign pulsing against the river. Past couples posing in front of murals I can't keep up with because they get buffed before I learn the artist's name. His building was a handsome red brick X whatever with a keypad and a bike rack too nice for its own safety. Inside smelled like sawdust and money. In the elevator he told me about how he once painted with crushed lipstick for the stain, and I said something pretend clever about capitalism tasting like cherry. We stared at the numbers lighting up. 2, 3, 4 loft. His door opened to curated chaos. Canvases leaned like tired party guests. A hulking wooden table wore an army of brushes, jars, an ashtray with one elegant ghost of a cigarette. Books stacked in towers, Sontag, Baldwin, catalogs from shows I squeezed into for free. Vintage show posters fought the exposed brick. It looked like a space you could live in and brag about simultaneously. I set my bag on an antique armchair that squeaked like it had opinions. He poured us wine with the flair of someone who regularly pours wine for people he wants to impress. We stood too close and examined a painting that looked like a bruise trying to become a galaxy. He said, "You see the heat?" And I said, "I feel it." And okay, yes, the flirting had graduate seminars. I was mid-sip when the bedroom door, flush against the brick like it had been edited in later, eased open. A woman came out. Lingerie, delicate, expensive, the color of a secret, with a glass of red in her hand and no particular hurry. She was beautiful in a way that suggested she'd looked at herself in a mirror and decided not to change a thing. She didn't look at him. She looked at me. And then he, so casual it had the violence of a shrug, said, "I wanted you to meet my girlfriend. We share everything." There are sentences that change the oxygen in a room. That one did it clean. Everything went crisp around the edges, and I could hear my pulse like a bad DJ. She lifted her glass an inch. That was the whole greeting. No names, no hope this is okay. Just an elegant tilt toward the couch, sit. A gesture that said the end of the sentence I hadn't heard was, "And you already agreed." He smiled as if he'd given me a present he'd waited all day to watch me unwrap. Here's something not fun I've learned. The moment right before you say no smells the same as the moment right before you say yes. It's metal and citrus, and all your worst decisions airing out their party clothes. I swallowed. I wanted to ask 100 precise questions like, did you mention a girlfriend out loud to yourself while brushing your teeth tonight? Did you practice the line? Did she nod? Instead I said, huh, because my mouth believes in minimalism under duress. I didn't hear the lock until it clicked. He'd turned and slid it with a smooth, practiced motion, a punctuation that repositioned the entire sentence of the night. It wasn't a bolt slammed in anger. It was a soft confirmation. The door, and I would not be speaking for a while. "Relax," he said, like my body was a dog that could be commanded. He took the middle cushion. She took the far one, then scooted until her bare thigh touched his jeans in a way that felt like a stage direction. She gestured again to the space between them. The wine leaned in my throat like a warning. I sat, but on the edge, knees angled toward the room, bag still in reach. My bisexual heart sometimes loves the geometry of desire. This wasn't that. This was math done to me. The girlfriend's smile was wide. The kind you see in vintage ads where the toothpaste is definitely full of lead. It didn't fix or falter. Her eyes didn't blink. I checked. Twice. She simply looked at me, a gaze as glossy as fresh varnish, and waited to see what I would become. He talked about openness like it was charity work, about energy, in a tone reserved for men who think they invented it, about how unusual I was and how unusual he was for noticing. And every time I tried to look away from her, the non-blink pulled me back like a magnet. The smile remained in place the way a mask does when the straps are too tight and the party is too long. My body recognized something before my brain did. The performance had run so often it no longer needed lines. "You're safe," he said gently, which is what people say right before they show you you're not. The room became sound design. The hum of the fridge, the radiators knocking, a car horn 3 floors down, the microscopic clink of her ring against the wineglass with every incremental breath. When I finally blinked my own eyes, they burned as if I'd forgotten how. The oldest trick I know is the sudden headache. It works because it's both plausible and contagious. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple, like a woman in a commercial for peppermint oil. "I'm so sorry," I said, and if you've lived a life like mine you know sorry is a master key. "Migraine. It's the lights. I should go lie down in my apartment." He looked annoyed at the inelegance of reality, then bored. Then he stood and unlocked the door, each movement radiating a disappointment he wanted me to carry home like a tote bag. "Another time," he said, as if rescheduling a dentist. The girlfriend didn't move. The smile did not ask for a rain check. It watched me gather myself atom by atom, watched me slip my bag over my shoulder, watched me cross the room like a tightrope. When I reached the door, the smile was still there, stretched like a taut ribbon across a face that never blinked. For one feral second I wanted to walk up to her and put my thumb on her cheek and press to see if it would spring back. Outside, the night remembered itself. Street noise rushed in like an apology, skateboard slap, laughter dripping off a stoop, a couple arguing softly about whether to risk the L. The air tasted like cold metal and burnt sugar from the late-night chuo cart. I walked fast until fast became normal, until the river air cut my face into feeling again. Back in my apartment, I did the rituals: block, delete, water glass, shower too hot. I crawled into bed and stared at the hairline crack in my ceiling I keep promising the landlord I'll document. Sleep came down lumpy and brief. When it finally broke, it spit me out with the image still welded behind my eyes. That grin. Not lust, not kindness, not even dominance, just a fixed permission. Like a sign slapped on a door. You're a part of this now. Over the next week, I became a connoisseur of mouths. I clocked every smile on the subway, every grin on a billboard, each bared tooth in a TikTok from a niece. I looked for the seam where performance becomes policy. It turns out the city is full of it, smiles meant for brands, for tips, for safety. Hers was none of those. Hers said, "I do not blink for you." For the record, my name is Sarah, and yes, I knew better. I knew better than to mistake quiet for safe, neat for harmless, shy for kind. Detroit teaches you to clock a person by how they hold a door, how they look when the bus doesn't come, how they talk to the cashier at Meijer when the card won't swipe. I know this. I knew this. And still, there I was at a diner off Michigan Avenue, telling myself that fluorescent lights and Formica tables meant nothing bad could happen to me in the next 4 hours. The place had that long, stainless counter where cooks slap down connies and eggs without looking, a humming soda gun, and a jar of pickled something nobody ever orders. Werner's syrupy in a glass. Salt stains on boots parked under the counter stools. February wind bumping the windows like a drunk cousin you can't get rid of. That kind of night. Mark, he said it soft, like it embarrassed him, was exactly the profile. Round glasses, a shy tuck of the chin when he smiled, hands that fidgeted with the paper napkin, as if it might tell him what to say next. He had typed out an earnest bio about obscure board games and first pressings, and really listening when people talk. You know the type. The decoys. The ones that wear gentleness like a borrowed coat. Our waitress called me Han, and him Sweetie, and refilled our coffees until the spoons were tea-stained. I told Mark about my grandma's porch on St. Aubin, how she swore Detroit air cured colds better than any pharmacy. He told me about a cat named Puzzle Master, one word, who liked to sleep on his turntable lid, and I laughed like that was charming. We discussed pizza like it was a religion. Buddies, yes, Little Caesars only in emergencies. And he listened, really listened, the kind of listening that makes you feel like you're glowing inside your coat. The food was nothing, scrambled, hashed, overdone, and that was the point. We were building trust on diner coffee and the illusion of Midwestern politeness. He cleared his throat on the check. I saw the blush start at the collar and spread like heat. I have a record I think you'd like, he said, knocking his knee against the booth by accident. Original Tamla pressing. Smoky. The one with the misprint on the label. It's kind of special. If you want to hear it. There's a particular arrogance in how safety feels right before it's taken away. I said yes. Midtown at night is a puzzle of quiet streets and sudden laughter. Wayne State kids smoking outside apartment buildings. The ghost of techno shaking the bones of old brick. We parked off Cass, near a mural of a tiger nobody bothered to tag. His place looked like a model apartment for a catalog. Shelves lined with records and spines of books you pretend you've read. A ficus doing its best in a corner. Not a single dish in the sink. I took it in with a little sigh of relief. Any woman will tell you we inventory, we clock exits, we note weapons of opportunity, cast iron pan, ceramic lamp, a heavy hardcover. This was tidy and boring. A victory lap. He gestured at the couch. I sat. He said he'd freshen up, which sounded like shaving cream and mouthwash, and maybe the brave application of cologne. I heard the bathroom fan click on. I smiled at the quiet tick of a wall clock in the living room. It felt like the inside of a bubble. Here's the part where you need to understand. The air told me first. Something in it thickened. The lemon cleaner smell pushed back, replaced by rubber and something sweeter, wrong, like the inside of a new tire left in the sun. The bathroom fan cut off. The steps that came down the short hallway didn't belong to the man I'd been drinking coffee with an hour earlier. They were careful, rolling heel to toe, and I already hated them before I saw him. He stood in the doorway like a shadow cut out of the room. The latex was black and glossy, head to foot, slick over shoulders and chest and thighs, a second skin that swallowed him whole. No eye holes I could see, no mouth slit, just a smooth, featureless mask with a hint of chin, and the shine of lamplight rippling over it like oil on water. His hands, dipped in that same black, held a pair of metal handcuffs that winked in the light as if they were in on the joke. I opened my mouth, and whatever words I thought would come out hid behind my heart and refused to move. "Call me Daddy," he said. Except he didn't say it. A thing inside a thing said it for him. The latex flattened his voice and dragged it into something low, underwater, a machine trying to imitate a human growl. He took a step. I did too, but backward, my calves knocking the couch. He tilted his head, the glossy oval of it reflecting the lamp like a dead, bright moon. "Or better," he said again, voice hitching, and then it pitched up into something reedy and thin that tugged at a childhood terror I thought I'd outgrown. "Call me Mom." I laugh at funerals. It's a flaw. The sound that scraped out of me then wasn't laughter exactly, but it was a cousin of it, a thing born of disbelief and adrenaline. The room narrowed and sharpened all at once. His posture wasn't shy anymore. The hunched shoulders were gone. He had length now, a straightness that said, "Finally, we're here." He let the cuffs dangle loose at his side, a cat toy for the kind of cat that eats birds whole. I remember thinking, as people do when they're close to a cliff, this can't be happening to me because I am still me, and that didn't change. Then the breathing started talking. You don't forget a sound like that. The mask turned his breath into a creature, wet and frantic, amplified and trapped, a drowning inside a face. Each inhale stuck against the latex with a sticky kiss. Each exhale fogged the shine and disappeared. It wasn't normal exertion. It was hunger wearing a snorkel. It was panic playing dress-up. It filled the room in a new way, sat beside me on the couch, slid between my ribs. In another life, in a club, late and consensual, maybe that sound is a signal, a language. In a bright, clean room over Cass Avenue, it was an alarm. I tried to get words to align in a sentence. "Mark," I said, and the name died in my mouth because there was no Mark in the room anymore to answer to it. "This isn't." I lifted a hand, palm out, the universal stop of every woman who's ever had to invent one. He took another step anyway, slow like a drawn-out threat, the squeak of latex rubbing latex like a violin string pulled across a blade. The cuffs clicked softly as they turned in his gloved grip. I saw the clock over his shoulder, the door to the hall behind him, the window with its stingy view of a brick wall. I did not see a version of this where I won a fight. I saw one where I spoke him down from a ledge he had built for himself, plank by plank, with politeness and gravity and a kind of pity he didn't deserve. The trick to getting out of a snare is to stop pretending you're not inside one. "I'm going to get some water," I said, slow, easy, as if I were announcing a commercial break. I lifted my empty hand as proof of non-threat. "Do you want any?" My voice did not shake. "I am proud of that." He turned his head, the whole polished oval of it, the breath inside hitching. I took the step around the coffee table, then another, keeping my eyes on him like he was a stray dog that wanted me to run. The kitchen sat to the left. The door sat to the right. The plastic runner on the hallway floor caught the lamplight. I could feel the apartment assembling into a map beneath my shoes. My fingers found the strap of my purse on the chair before the door and curled around it like a rope thrown to a drowning swimmer. The wet breathing thickened. I could feel it on my forearms now, like humidity, like July in a house with no AC. "Sarah," he said, and the name came out mangled, two voices trying to wear it at once. Whatever softness I arrived with left my body like steam. "No," I said. "Just that." Something about the word made the room clearer, the edges of things friendlier to my survival. He lifted the cuffs a fraction, a small glitter of metal that wanted to be a promise. I moved when he moved, not away but not toward either. We made a prayer wheel of the coffee table, me careful, him deliberate, his new skin complaining in tiny squeals. My hand found the deadbolt in a blind arch, thumb pressed, twist, the metallic thunk of freedom sliding into the open. He tensed at the sound, not a flinch, exactly, more like a realization that the stage directions had changed. "Daddy," he tried again, or maybe it was Mom, or maybe it was both layered like acetate until your brain filled the blanks with whichever scared you more. Here's something useful you learn in this city. Nobody cares what you look like sprinting down a hallway if you do it with purpose. I did not run. I did not give him the chase he was built for. I opened the door, stepped into the bright cold of the corridor, and let it shut behind me on its hinge with all the finality of a judge's gavel. I heard the breath on the other side press against wood, a soft fogged kiss, then nothing. I didn't breathe right again until I was in my car. My hands shook on the steering wheel so hard the wipers twitched. The streetlights downcast made puddles of light on old brick and wet street. A bus sighed at the corner, letting off 3 teenagers and a woman with a better-made bag tucked under her arm like a football. Normal. Normal, 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 I told myself, as if repetition could cast a spell and turn the creature back into a man. Chicago's South Side raised me tough. You learn early that charm doesn't mean honesty, and polish doesn't mean safety. Still, I let myself slip into a little fantasy the night I met Brandon. His Tinder profile screamed money, suits cut sharp, vacations in Bali, selfies on boats with champagne flutes. He had the kind of arrogance you could feel through the screen. Most women would swipe left on that sort of ego. Me? I wanted to see how deep the crack ran beneath all that polish. That's how I ended up smoothing my dress in the mirror of the Gilded Rib, a River North steakhouse dripping with velvet and brass. Not my usual spot. I'm more Harold's Chicken Shack than $26 martinis. But Brandon made it clear this was his territory. If you wanted to meet him, you played his game. He arrived like he owned the place. Blue suit, Rolex flashing, smile too white to be real. His handshake lingered on my fingers longer than I liked, his eyes stripping me down in a way that made my skin prickle. "Damn, Amara," he said, voice as smooth as the whiskey he ordered without asking. "You're even better than the pictures." I let him run the show. He ordered me a cocktail called a French kiss, champagne, Chambord, something pink and fizzy. He sipped his martini like a man who thought he was being studied by Forbes magazine. The first 20 minutes were a performance. He bragged about his work in finance, tossed out acronyms and firm names like confetti, smirked at his own stories about closing deals and teaching junior traders how it's done. He didn't ask a single question about me. Every movement, his hand chopping the air, his chin tilt, felt rehearsed, like he'd studied how to impress women the way he studied market trends. It was brittle charm, shiny on the outside, hollow underneath. I sipped my drink, smiled when I had to, and wondered what version of him would crawl out once the mask slipped. The steaks arrived, glistening under the low light. My filet mignon smelled like heaven. His porterhouse looked like something primal. He ate with the intensity of a man proving a point. Then he dropped his fork, winked at me, and said, "Nature calls." He didn't come back. 5 minutes. 10. 20. The waiter, a kid with kind eyes and South Side vowels like mine, kept glancing at me. The couple at the next table, all pearls and cufflinks, paused their conversation to listen for cracks in my composure. 30 minutes. My heart started its slow drum. Had he ditched me? It would have been humiliating, but at least it would have been clean. Just as I slid my clutch onto my shoulder to leave, the oak door in the back creaked open. Brandon stumbled out. The suit was still on, but sloppier, tie loose, shirt half untucked. His forehead shone with sweat even in the restaurant's chill. And his pupils were blown wide, black holes swallowing the soft candlelight. His jaw ticked, grinding like something feral was trying to gnaw its way out of him. He slouched into his chair, gulped his water, then grinned at me with teeth that no longer looked blinding but animal. The room shifted. Conversation stopped. Every eye was on us. "Damn, you're gorgeous," he muttered, words slurred, lips wet. He leaned forward across the table with a lunge that made my body jerk back. His hand shot out, rough against my chin, tilting my face toward his. Before I could speak, his tongue was in my mouth, fast, invasive, tasting of bitter chemicals that burned down my throat. Not whiskey. Not steak. Something harsher, metallic, acrid. I gagged, pushed against his chest, but he pressed harder, devouring me like the steak he'd torn into earlier. When he pulled back, his breath hit me like fumes. "Fuck, baby," he rasped, his voice both loud and secretive, words tumbling out into the silence of the restaurant. "I want you bent over in that bathroom stall. Legs up, heels digging into my back. I'll fuck you so hard you'll forget your own name." Every syllable hung in the air like smoke. The Martins, the couple at the next table, were frozen pale, their forks mid-air. They had heard every word. Heat flared in my cheeks, anger, shame, fear, all twisted together. Brandon leaned closer, eyes darting over my body with a hunger that felt less like desire and more like consumption. That's when I saw it. A dusting of white smeared across his nostril, glinting in the dim light. Coke. Maybe worse. Suddenly the puzzle fit. The bathroom absence, the jerky movements, the wild dilation of his pupils. My stomach dropped. "You like this," he whispered, breath hot against my ear. "Don't pretend. I saw you watching me. You like danger." My silence, stunned, horrified, he mistook as agreement. His grip loosened just enough for me to breathe, but his gaze pinned me in place, a predator convinced his prey was playing along. And in that moment, I felt something terrifying flicker inside me, a brief, shameful arousal, tangled with adrenaline. It made me nauseous. It made me furious. I forced my lips into a smile. Southside grit isn't just fists, it's survival strategy. You know, I murmured, steady despite the hammer of my heart, I've got an early client meeting tomorrow. His grin faltered, confusion flickering in his drugged-out eyes. He muttered something incoherent, his jaw still grinding. I slid out of the booth smoothly, clutch in hand. My heels clicked against the polished wood, a steady rhythm, my head high though my skin crawled. The waiters avoided my eyes, but I felt their concern like heat. The Martins stared, pity mingled with horror. The chandeliers above seemed too bright, shadows stretching too long as I pushed through the oak doors. Outside, Chicago's autumn air wrapped around me, sharp, clean, filled with exhaust and street food smoke. I inhaled like it was oxygen for the first time. I walked until my legs ached, until the glittering towers of River North gave way to the familiar grit of the South Side. Finally, I hailed a cab. The driver, an older man who caught my accent immediately, asked, "Long night?" "You could say that," I muttered. By the time I reached my brick apartment building, the porch light glowing like a beacon, my anger had cooled into a heavy, bitter weight. I kicked off my heels, locked the door, and sat on the worn rug with a glass of water, trying to wash away the taste of chemicals still clinging to my tongue. Brandon's face kept flashing in my head, the dilated eyes, the powdery smear, the grin that mistook violation for intimacy. He thought he was dangerous. He thought I wanted it. But the truth was simpler, scarier. He was just another broken man, wrapped in a suit too expensive for the body it covered, chasing highs he couldn't afford to come down from. I'll never step foot in the Gilded Rib again. I'll never swipe right on another finance bro with a yacht photo. The dating app is deleted, my inbox cleared. We'd matched on an app weeks before, bonding over tacos, bands we'd both seen at Mohawk, and our mutual disdain for people who said "keep Austin weird," like it was a brand slogan. She had this messy, alternative style, tattoos half-finished, eyeliner smudged in a way that made her look like she'd just crawled out of a basement show. I was in grad school, drowning in research and caffeine, so she felt like oxygen. We met on East 6th for tacos and beer, and she was exactly what her profile promised. Sharp, funny, carrying herself like she knew everyone was watching but couldn't care less. By the second beer, my nerves softened into something more dangerous, want. She laughed with her whole body, leaning in too close, fingers brushing my wrist just long enough to linger. When she suggested we head back to her place, the thought of saying no didn't cross my mind. The drive through Austin felt cinematic, the skyline glowing faint against the black sky, her hand occasionally sliding over to squeeze my thigh like punctuation in a conversation we hadn't started yet. I was already picturing the night ahead. Wine, maybe records spinning on an old turntable, kissing until it bled into something more. I was hopeful, nervous, buzzing. Her apartment was in one of those old complexes east of I-35, the kind with chipped paint and flickering outdoor lights. Inside, the place smelled faintly of incense and sweat, walls plastered with band posters curling at the edges. My eyes caught on little details, 2 toothbrushes by the sink, men's sneakers by the door, but I shrugged them off. Roommate? Brother? Casual clutter? I told myself not to overthink it. She pressed me down onto the couch, her body warm against mine, her lips tasting faintly of beer and lime. Her hands moved with certainty, like she'd done this exact dance before and wanted me to keep up. I was lost in the heat of it, the way her hair brushed my face, the soft groan she let slip against my mouth. Then the front door clicked. Not hesitant, not soft, decisive. The sound of someone coming home. She didn't flinch. I froze, blood roaring in my ears. The door swung open, and in stepped a man. He dropped a backpack with a heavy thud, like he was coming back to his own place, not visiting. His jaw was tight, his eyes cutting straight through me, and I could feel his anger before he even opened his mouth. Except, he didn't. He didn't yell. He didn't demand an explanation. He just walked past us, sat on the couch across the room, and stared. I looked at her, waiting for a reaction, but she only smiled faintly, her hand sliding back onto my chest as if nothing had changed. She kissed my neck, her lips hot and wet against my skin, then leaned close to my ear. "Ignore him," she whispered, voice low, playful, terrifying. "He likes to watch." I stiffened, every nerve screaming to get up, but she pushed harder against me, her thigh sliding over mine, her breath quickening. She kissed me again, harder this time, like she was daring me to stop. I could feel the man's eyes drilling into me, a weight so heavy I thought I might suffocate. I tried to look away, to focus on her, but curiosity betrayed me. I glanced over. He hadn't moved. Not an inch. His expression was wrong, not furious, not hurt, but something worse. Detached. Fascinated. Then slowly he raised his phone. I heard the faint chime as he opened the camera. The lens pointed straight at me. At us. He didn't say a word. Didn't breathe any louder. He just filmed, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. The kind of smile that made my stomach twist. My date pressed her body closer, moaning softly against my ear, whispering filth like she was in on some joke I'd never understand. Her nails dug into my shirt, dragging down, grazing skin. She moved like the presence of the man, of the camera, wasn't strange but necessary. And the man kept filming. I couldn't do it. The weight of his silence, the unblinking stare through the glass of that phone, her casual acceptance, it was too much. My chest felt tight, my body buzzing with panic. I should go, I stammered, voice weak, my hands pushing her gently but firmly away. She tilted her head, pouting like a child denied candy, but she didn't argue. She just sat back, eyes glinting like she knew I'd fold and come back. The man lowered his phone, his smile unchanged. I grabbed my jacket and left. The night air slapped me awake, cool and sharp, but it didn't wash away the feeling that I'd been caught in something designed to trap me. The apartment lights glowed behind me, and I couldn't shake the image of him sitting there, still staring, still smiling, still recording. Even now, when I tell people about it, it's not the girl's whisper that chills me most. It's not the casual way she let her ex's presence fold into the intimacy of the night. It's the silence. That smile. The unblinking eye of his camera. I don't know where that video is now. Maybe it's saved on his phone. Maybe it's somewhere darker. Maybe I'm already out there, a piece of someone else's collection. And I don't know what's worse, the thought that he watched it again later, or the thought that he didn't need to. That filming me once, silently, was enough. I had been here in LA for only a few months, and already I was sick of it. The endless shallow smiles, the dead-end conversations, the polished dating profiles that all read the same. I wanted something different, something dangerous enough to wake me up. That's when Serafina appeared on my feed. Her pictures didn't look like anyone else's. They looked like something pulled from a fever dream. Shadows, velvet, a mouth caught mid-smile, half-naked poses that dared me to stare longer than I should. Her bio didn't waste time. I don't do boring. I don't do polite. I don't do public. I should have swiped left, but I didn't. I messaged her, and to my surprise she actually responded. Not with an emoji, not with a half-hearted LOL, but with sentences sharp enough to cut. She was quick, clever, dark. Talking to her felt like trying to keep up with someone running ahead, always just out of reach. She told me about art, about breaking rules, about wanting things people were too afraid to say out loud. She teased me with little hints about pleasure and pain, about the kind of fun you couldn't have under fluorescent lights. When she finally told me to come over, no dinner, no drinks, just her place, tonight, I said yes before I even thought about it. Driving across the city, I couldn't stop gripping the wheel. The skyline glowed in the haze, cars bleeding red and white across the freeway. My chest buzzed with nerves, but my stomach twisted with something else, anticipation. This was exactly what I'd been looking for. A woman like fire. A woman who would burn me. Her apartment was in Koreatown, tucked between a dingy laundromat and a bodega with flickering lights. When she opened the door, I nearly forgot how to breathe. She was even more intoxicating than her pictures. Long black dress flowing like liquid, hair wild, lips painted the shade of blood. She kissed me on the mouth as if we already belonged to each other. Inside, the air was heavy with incense, exotic and overwhelming. Candles burned everywhere, shadows stretching and twitching across the walls. Music poured out of hidden speakers, slow, low, sensual, the kind of sound that makes your body move without asking permission. We sank onto her velvet couch. The cushion swallowed us whole as she curled against me, her hand sliding along my thigh, her lips close enough to taste the faint smoke clinging to them. Her voice was low, teasing, as we talked about nothing and everything. Desire pulsed between us like static. When she kissed me again, I felt myself sink. Her tongue, her nails grazing my chest, the way she pressed herself into me, my body betrayed me, begging for more. That's when I saw it. In the corner of the room, a faint red glow blinked. At first, I thought it was another candle, but as my eyes adjusted, I saw it clearly. A phone mounted on a sleek black tripod, its recording light blinking like an unblinking eye. My heart lurched. I pulled back, but Serafina leaned in closer, lips brushing my ear. "Don't stop," she whispered. "They've been waiting for this." Every muscle in me froze. "They? What do you mean?" I choked out. She didn't answer. She just smiled, slow and knowing, and slid her hand lower, pressing against me through my jeans. I couldn't think. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed another glow, this one from a laptop on the table. At first, it was just color and motion. Then I focused. Lines of text scrolled upward in a relentless stream. Usernames, emojis, hearts, flames, words like hot, yes more. My mouth went dry. It wasn't just her phone. This was live. We were live. Hundreds of people watching. Watching my hands on her, my lips against hers. Watching me lose control. I jerked back, but she held me down, stronger than I expected. Her eyes weren't full of passion. They were cold, detached, like she wasn't even here. "Relax," she said, her voice syrup slow. "They love you already." I turned to the laptop again, panic rising in my throat. Then I saw it. Mark_LA. My name. My username from the dating app. It flashed up on the feed, and then another popped up. "Go Mark." And another. "Mark baby, don't stop." Variations of my name, twisting my identity into a chant. They knew me. They weren't just watching, they were addressing me. I felt sick. My blood ran cold. I hadn't given her that. She couldn't have known. More messages appeared, usernames I vaguely recognized from the app, now cheering me on, as if my private moments belonged to them all along. My body trembled with rage and humiliation. The music pounded in my ears. The candles flickered violently. Her nails dug into my skin as she bit my lip, hard enough to taste blood. The chat feed exploded with emojis. "Stop," I gasped louder this time, shoving against her chest. She didn't flinch. She tilted her head, lips curving into that faint smile that made me feel small. She loosened her grip just enough, but she didn't move away. She just looked at me like she still owned me, like she was certain I'd fold. I scrambled off the couch, breath ragged. My eyes burned from the glow of the laptop screen, messages still flooding upward, hundreds of strangers chanting my name. I couldn't look away. It felt like if I turned my back, they'd reach through the screen and drag me under. Serafina stayed on the couch. She didn't chase me. She didn't speak. She just sat there in the shadows, one arm draped lazily, eyes gleaming, that same patient smile on her lips. I bolted for the door. My voice cracked as I muttered something, an apology, an excuse, I don't even remember. The last thing I saw before the hallway swallowed me was her face, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, framed by flickering candlelight. The red recording light blinked behind her like a heartbeat. I drove without direction, the skyline bleeding around me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I couldn't bring myself to look. The idea that one of those usernames had followed me into the real world was unbearable. The thing about Mardi Gras season in New Orleans is that everyone becomes someone else for a while. The masks, the beads, the intoxicating blend of jazz and chaos spilling from every doorway. It all creates this electric atmosphere where normal rules don't seem to apply. That's what I told myself later, anyway, when I was trying to make sense of what happened with Marcus. I met him on a Tuesday night in February, 3 weeks before Fat Tuesday itself. I was walking down Royal Street after grabbing dinner at this little Creole place I'd been wanting to try, when I literally bumped into him coming out of a vintage bookstore. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his fingers through it, and these incredibly intense green eyes. When he smiled and apologized, I noticed he had this slight gap between his front teeth that somehow made him even more attractive. "Let me buy you a coffee to make up for nearly knocking you over," he said, and his voice had this warm, honeyed quality that made my stomach flutter. We ended up at Café du Monde, because where else do you take someone during Mardi Gras season? He told me he was from Baton Rouge originally, but had moved to the Quarter 2 years ago to work as a freelance photographer. He specialized in what he called atmospheric shots, abandoned buildings, cemeteries at dusk, that sort of thing. It should have been my first red flag, but sitting there watching him talk about light and shadow while powdered sugar dusted his fingers, I was completely charmed. We talked for 2 hours. He had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the most fascinating person in the world, leaning forward slightly, never checking his phone, asking follow-up questions that showed he was really paying attention. When I mentioned I was a graphic designer who'd moved to New Orleans 6 months ago for work, he lit up. "You must have an eye for composition then," he said. "I'd love to show you some of my work sometime." That sometime turned out to be 3 days later. He texted me Friday afternoon asking if I wanted to skip the usual French Quarter madness and have a quiet night in. I've got a collection of old horror movies, he wrote. The kind they don't make anymore. Real atmospheric stuff. I should mention that I love horror movies. Always have, since I was a kid sneaking downstairs to watch late-night creature features when my parents thought I was asleep. There's something about the way a good horror film builds tension, the careful orchestration of dread, that I find almost artistic. So when Marcus suggested we watch some classics, I was immediately interested. His apartment was in a converted Creole townhouse on Dauphine Street, 3rd floor, with these gorgeous original hardwood floors and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the narrow street below. The living room was dimly lit by a few strategically placed lamps, and he had this incredible vintage movie poster collection covering one entire wall. Nosferatu, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Vampire. Real classics. Wow, I said, genuinely impressed. These are amazing. I'm drawn to the aesthetics of classic horror, he said, moving to pour us each a glass of red wine. There's something pure about the way they created atmosphere back then. No CGI, no cheap jump scares. Just psychological tension and visual poetry. He'd already set up the first movie, Black Sunday from 1960, this gorgeous Italian Gothic horror film I'd heard of but never seen. We settled onto his couch, which was this deep burgundy velvet thing that looked like it belonged in a Victorian parlor, and he dimmed the lights until the room was lit only by the flickering glow from the television screen. The movie was stunning, all stark black and white cinematography and creeping dread. Marcus kept up a quiet commentary, pointing out camera angles and lighting techniques, his voice low and intimate in the darkness. Somewhere during the second act, when the witch's mask was being hammered onto Barbara Steele's face, I realized he'd moved closer to me on the couch. His thigh was pressed against mine, and I could smell his cologne, something woody and expensive. "This is the scene that made me fall in love with horror cinematography," he murmured, his breath warm against my ear. "Look at the way they use shadow to suggest violence without showing it explicitly." I turned to respond and found his face much closer than I'd expected. Those green eyes were fixed on mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. The movie continued playing, but I was no longer paying attention to Barbara Steele's screams. "You have beautiful eyes," he said softly. "They're so expressive. I bet you'd photograph beautifully in black and white." Before I could respond, he was kissing me. It started gentle, almost tentative, his lips soft against mine. I melted into it, my hand finding the back of his neck, fingers tangling in his hair. He tasted like the wine we'd been drinking, dark and rich. But then something shifted. His kiss became more urgent, more demanding. His teeth grazed my lower lip, and I felt a sharp little sting that made me gasp. He pulled back slightly, and I could see his eyes in the flickering light from the TV screen. They looked different somehow, darker, more intense. "Sorry," he whispered, but he didn't sound sorry. "I get carried away sometimes." He kissed me again, harder this time, and I felt his teeth catch my lip again, more deliberately. This time the sting was sharper, more pronounced. I made a small sound of surprise and tried to pull back, but his hand was tangled in my hair, holding me in place. "Marcus," I started to say, but he was kissing me again, and this time I definitely felt his teeth break the skin. There was a warm, metallic taste in my mouth, and I realized with a shock that it was blood. I tried to laugh it off, the way you do when something unexpected happens and you're not sure how to react. "Hey, easy there," I said, touching my lip. My finger came away with a small smear of red. But Marcus wasn't laughing. He was staring at my mouth with this strange, glassy expression, like he was seeing something I couldn't. Then, before I could process what was happening, he leaned forward and very deliberately licked the blood from my lip. The sensation was so unexpected, so intimate and wrong at the same time, that I froze completely. His tongue was warm and soft, but there was something predatory about the way he did it, something that made every instinct in my body scream that this wasn't normal. "I only kiss this way when I really like someone," he whispered, his voice husky and strange. His eyes never left mine, and in the blue glow from the television, they looked almost luminous. He kissed me again, and this time there was nothing gentle about it. His teeth found my lip immediately, biting down with enough force to draw more blood. I tried to pull away, but his grip on my hair tightened, and his other hand came up to cup my face, holding me in place. The pain was sharp and immediate, but what disturbed me more was the way he seemed to be savoring it. I could feel him licking at the wound he'd created, his breathing becoming heavier, more excited. When he finally pulled back, there was blood on his lips, and he licked it away slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. "You taste incredible," he murmured, and there was something in his voice that made my skin crawl. I should have left then. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me to get up, make an excuse, and get out of there. But there was something hypnotic about the whole situation, something that kept me frozen on that burgundy velvet couch while Barbara Steele's screams echoed from the forgotten movie. He kissed me again, and again his teeth found my lip, reopening the wound. This time I whimpered, the sound involuntary and frightened, but he seemed to take it as encouragement. His kisses became more frenzied, more desperate, like he was chasing something he couldn't quite catch. The blood was flowing more freely now, and I could taste it constantly metallic and warm. But what terrified me most wasn't the pain or even the blood. It was the look in his eyes. He never blinked, never looked away, just stared at me with this intense, satisfied expression while he licked and sucked at my wounded lip. It was like he was feeding. Finally, when I couldn't take it anymore, I managed to push him away with enough force to break his grip. "Stop," I said, my voice shaky. "That's enough." He sat back, breathing hard, and for a moment he looked almost confused, like he was coming out of some kind of trance. Then he smiled, that same charming smile that had attracted me in the first place, but now it looked different. Predatory. "Sorry," he said again, but his eyes were still fixed on my mouth, on the blood that was still seeping from my lip. "I told you I get carried away." I mumbled something about needing to use the bathroom, and practically fled down the hallway. In the mirror, I looked like I'd been in a fight. My lip was swollen and split in 2 places, blood smeared around my mouth and down my chin. I cleaned myself up as best I could, but the wounds were deeper than I'd realized. When I came back to the living room, Marcus was sitting exactly where I'd left him, still staring at the spot where I'd been sitting. The movie was still playing, but he wasn't watching it. He was just sitting there with that same glassy, satisfied expression. "I should go," I said, grabbing my purse. "Of course," he said, standing up smoothly. "Let me walk you to your car." The whole way down the stairs and out to the street, he was perfectly polite, perfectly normal. He even kissed me goodbye, gently this time, carefully avoiding my injured lip. But I could feel him watching me as I drove away, and when I glanced in my rearview mirror, he was still standing on the sidewalk, silhouetted against the warm glow spilling from the townhouse windows. I never saw Marcus again after that night, though I heard from a friend of a friend that he'd moved away from New Orleans suddenly sometime in March. No forwarding address, no explanation to his landlord. Just gone. But here's the thing that still gives me chills when I think about it. The detail that haunts me more than the blood or the pain, or even the way he seemed to lose himself in the act of hurting me. It was the eye contact. The entire time he was biting me, licking my blood, feeding on my pain, he never once looked away. Never blinked, never closed his eyes, never showed even a moment of shame or hesitation. He just stared at me with this deep, primal satisfaction, like he was watching something beautiful and terrible unfold. Like he was savoring not just the taste of my blood, but the sight of my fear, my confusion, my helplessness. And when he swallowed, God, I can still hear that soft, deliberate sound he made. His eyes actually seemed to glow with pleasure, like he'd just experienced something transcendent. Detroit nights always carry a kind of heaviness, but that night it pressed down harder than usual, like the air itself knew something was off before I did. I told myself this was safe, and yet, even before Mark smiled across the table, part of me already sensed a shadow underneath all the politeness. And at first, our conversation was just that, harmless. We compared our jobs, our families, even our pizza preferences. He asked questions, listened, laughed at all the right moments. Too neat. Too tidy. His eyes lingered longer than they should have on my mouth when I took a sip of coffee, but I brushed it off. The food was bland, forgettable, yet the moment had a false comfort to it. When he asked me to come back to his place to listen to a rare record, I agreed, lulled into thinking that dullness was safety. Maybe it was the way he blushed when he asked, or the fact that the night felt like it was ending too cleanly, too normal. I didn't yet realize that normalcy was his trick, the stage setting before the mask slipped. His apartment matched him, organized, clean, everything in its proper place. Shelves of books, alphabetized records, and a faint smell of lemon cleaner. I sat down on his couch, phone in hand, waiting for him to bring out the vinyl. He excused himself, disappearing down the hallway to freshen up. I scrolled absently, the ticking of a wall clock stretching too loud in the silence. When the footsteps came back, I knew something had shifted before I even looked up. The air felt different, thicker, almost damp. And then I saw him. Mark wasn't Mark anymore. He filled the doorway dressed head to toe in slick black latex, the material hugging every inch of his body and glinting under the dim light. A mask covered his entire face, glossy and featureless except for the faint impression of where a chin should have been. In his gloved hands, he held a pair of metal handcuffs, dangling loosely but deliberate. My breath caught. My body didn't know whether to freeze or flee. The latex muffled his voice, distorting it into something deeper, guttural, inhuman. "Call me Daddy," he rasped, the sound vibrating in the air like a growl. I sat rigid, unable to answer, every muscle locking in place. Then he shifted tone, voice pitching higher, eerie and childlike. "Or better, call me Mom." The words made my stomach flip. It wasn't just a role play or a fetish reveal. It was a fracture, a glimpse of something fractured and unstable. The shy, awkward man I thought I'd met over coffee had vanished. In his place was a faceless figure dripping menace, commanding me in voices that didn't belong to him. He took a step closer, the latex creaking with each movement. My gaze darted to the handcuffs, to the mask, to the closed door behind him. I opened my mouth to speak, but what came out was silence. And then I heard it, the sound that would haunt me long after the night ended. His breathing. The mask turned each inhale and exhale into something grotesque, wet and frantic, like he was suffocating in there, drowning in his own obsession. Each breath filled the room, amplified by the latex until it sounded animal. Not steady, not calm, but ragged and desperate, as though the act of being inside that suit was overwhelming him. The noise burrowed into my skull, intimate and invasive, something I wasn't meant to hear. He stood taller than before, confidence radiating from the glossy shell of his new identity. His chest rose and fell violently, the handcuffs glinting like bait. Every shift of his body sent a ripple of latex squealing against itself, a constant reminder of the second skin he'd chosen over his own. The ordinary man I'd shared pie and coffee with no longer existed. This was what he had been hiding all along, what he had been waiting to unleash. I could barely think. My mind was scrambling, flipping through the conversation we'd had, the harmless jokes, the blush when he invited me over. None of it belonged to him. It had been a mask, just like the latex one now staring back at me. He moved closer again, slow, deliberate. The cuffs swayed in his hand, the faintest metallic clink punctuating the wet, frantic rhythm of his breathing. Every sound cut through me like glass. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body betrayed me, frozen to the couch as though my muscles had forgotten how to respond. The room itself betrayed me too. What had once been neat, unassuming, and sterile now felt like a stage set for my entrapment. Every object too tidy, every corner too sharp, like the space had been arranged with this reveal in mind. When I finally found the will to move, I stood abruptly, words spilling out in a broken rush. An excuse, a plea, something about having to leave. My heart slammed against my ribs so violently I thought it might split me open. He didn't block my path. He didn't even follow. He simply stood there, latex gleaming, chest heaving, the cuffs glinting in the low light. Watching. Waiting. Breathing. I left in a blur. The hallway outside felt brighter than it should, but no less suffocating. I didn't stop until I was in my car, hands trembling on the steering wheel, lungs struggling to fill. Every sound in the night, the hum of traffic, the distant laughter of strangers, warped into echoes of his masked breath. The physical escape was simple enough. I never saw him again, never returned his messages, never risked walking near that diner where it all began. But the real aftermath never left. Because when I close my eyes at night, I don't see his mask or even the cuffs. I hear it, that frantic, wet breathing, the sound of someone losing himself in a second skin, demanding I lose myself too. It creeps back in the quietest moments, alone in bed, waiting for sleep. At work, when the office is hushed. In the shower, when the water drowns out everything else. The noise comes back, uninvited, and with it the memory of how quickly the ordinary can collapse into the monstrous. Detroit diners are supposed to be safe. Coffee dates are supposed to be harmless. But now I know better. Behind politeness, behind a shy smile and stories about board games, someone can be waiting. Someone can be planning. And when the mask finally slips, when the latex shines and the breathing starts, there's no going back. I walked out untouched, but not unscarred.